Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Vedika Kakkar, and I'm a correspondent for Juris News. Today with us, we have Ms. Kavita Mohanty. Ms. Mohanty is a graduate of the University of Cambridge with an LLM in International Law. She graduated with BLS LLB at the coveted and historic Government Law College of Bombay in India, where she served on the editorial board of the GLC Law Review. She is currently associated with Cambridge Pro Bono Project as a part of the research team. Ms. Mohanty has previously worked as a researcher with the Migration and Asylum Project along with the Center for Communication Governance at National Law University, Delhi. We are so happy to have you with us today. So, starting off, you just graduated from Cambridge. So, if you could please tell us about your experience over there.
Firstly, thank you so much, Vedika. I'm quite pleased to be spending my Sunday with you over here, and it's an absolute honor to be talking to you and to the audience who are going to see this. Um, for me to be able to summarize the last 9 months in a minute is going to be difficult, but I will try. My entire journey at Cambridge has been extremely ecstatic, for sure. But more so it's been the competitive spirit around over here which has literally pushed me from what I was 9 months ago and what I am today. I don't believe the journey to get into Cambridge just starts during the application process, like everybody would know, but it begins way before, you've got into school and stuff, where all of those little things pieced together are going to be useful over here when you come here, because you're away from home. If you're going to be living in a university town, which is very different from a normal city or town that you live in, so that really adds up to your experience as well. You're going to be meeting people who are from different parts of the world, and it's not just the food exchange that you do, but also the cultural exchange, and also in terms of how other people think from different continents, that really shapes the way you perceive the law and life. So I have made the best use of my last 9 months at Cambridge. If I were to be asked, would I do it any differently, I would say no. I think I came with a plan over here. I did my homework as to what are the things I wanted to do, and I have checklisted each one of them, and I have graduated, so my parents will be happy about that. But yes, it's been quite a fulfilling journey at the age of 23, so I'm very happy about that.
That's just 23, and you must be having people from across ages at a graduate university, and that must be so exciting to learn from people from different areas, different ages, different social sects, different countries. Even at Government Law College in Mumbai, where you did your undergrad from, even there, it's a very, very diverse group of people which come together. So, how would you probably would want to contrast the diversity at like Government Law College, GLC, Mumbai, versus somewhere more internationally with a very, very rigorous entrance process like Cambridge?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and it would be rather injustice if I were to say they both were similar. But I feel like the premise that Government Law College Mumbai laid out for me has really made me stronger over here for two reasons. Firstly, the diversity in terms of the school that I did my undergrad in was absolutely different, because you still had people from different parts of the country, right? So in terms of that, yes, you were mingling with people from different cultures, languages, mindsets, but on a global scale, it completely changes, because you not just there is some commonality when you're still studying in India. You can still relate with people, correct? And you still have your family as a support. I feel like back at home, I used to go back home after I finished my lectures at Government Law College. But here, I am going back to a house, for example, where I live with 16 other people from 16 different nationalities, right? So the contrasting part would be in terms of not just age. Like, I have had students who've been my peers from, like, they've been 21 to, like, say 30, 31. So it's been a really large cohort in terms of the age. You do feel a bit overwhelmed at times, but you mustn't forget that the wealth of knowledge that you come from, you're always going to have people ahead of you or behind you. So you can still bring something on the table. That's precisely why you've reached these universities. I know a lot of people, and at times even I felt like I'm in this cocoon over here, and would I be able to cope up? But you just need to take it one day at a time, I feel. So in terms of the diversity, I would say like there are some peers of mine from certain specific countries, and they're my age, for example. But I have been marveled at their brain and their clarity of thought every time they open their mouth in classes. So I've taken so much back, even though I've not been able to contribute, maybe say for a particular lecture, because the way we've been taught back at home has been drastically different. But I feel the research skills or the way you think, it just gets better. You still have a base that you come with, so that base is never going to go wrong. And that's precisely why I'm grateful to Government Law College. And it's just gotten better in the last 9 months thanks to Cambridge.
Right. I wanted to actually listen about your government law college versus Cambridge contrast, specifically because of the reason you just mentioned that what students are taught in undergrad degrees back at home must be very different in the way of teaching, in the way students perceive lectures, in the way lectures are given at Cambridge. And you're doing a very interesting project on the Cambridge Pro Bono project to increase this legal access to education. So if you could tell us about your project and also tell us how you probably deal with, when you mention students, how you deal with them, telling them that you have a very massive cultural shock when you enter an international institution versus whatever you have learned. There's a lot of unlearning and learning process which goes on. So how do you approach that?
Okay, so as far as I can gather, there are two limbs to what I want to say.
Yes.
Firstly, I will tell you about the lecture system, and then I will tell you simultaneously about how the pro bono project has shaped me and like the work that I do. Right. So in terms of the lecture, it's fairly simple and different. We have the lecture system and seminars. Basically, you're given copious amounts of reading that you need to do. You choose 4 modules at Cambridge. Likewise, even at Oxford, if you were to come here, you choose 4 modules. Out of them, you can determine whether you want to do a specialization or not, which I did. So I took 3 modules out of 4, which have been completely international law related. So my master's is in international law, for example, but I have a couple of peers and colleagues who have done a general LLM or an LLM in corporate law, commercial law, so to speak. So firstly, in terms of the modules that you pick, you have seminars on these modules once every week. So they are 2 hours a lecture. It seems in the start, I found like, I was like, there are only 16 lectures the whole academic year, because Cambridge term is divided into 3 terms. You have Michaelmas term, the first 3 months starting from October. You have Lent term, and you have Easter term, where in the Easter term, we tend to have exams. So in the Easter term, there's just going to be revisions, and, you have to do a lot of self-study. And this is where it was very similar to Government Law College, and this is where United States contrasts itself from the UK system. I had the good fortune to also visit a couple of classes at UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin Law School. And their Socratic method of teaching is very different from UK. And this is where Government Law College really helped me, because, the rote learning that we've had, and we've been more dependent on understanding the statutes and just presenting the law as we read. But over here, there's more about you need to engage with the text that you get. So in terms of the lectures that we had, if you've not studied and you've come to class, the professor might just cold call you. But it's not as rigorous as the American system I have seen. So there's still a bit of room to maneuver in the class, because you have certain peers who will bring forth and you can have a good discussion in class. But mind you, you need to be able to do those readings, and the readings are fairly structured, like in terms of recommended readings and like readings that you ought to do. Okay. So over the course of the academic year, you make sure you come prepared, you can engage with different, scholars, and a lot of these scholars who have written these articles and papers are also your professors at Cambridge. So that is really incredible, because you're having a debate with them live. If you look at it, they've written something, say 2 years ago, but if you don't agree with what they have written in a particular article, they're standing right in front of you, you could dispute it with them. So that's been an enthralling experience for me, firstly. Secondly, this is where your peers come in, I feel, because they bring in certain perspectives which you might have not even thought about, right? And this is where I feel like in terms of the Indian legal education, I feel that there were certain places where I was at a back foot, and I am not afraid of admitting that, because in class, and this is where the whole supportive system comes from, right? In class, there came a time, for example, if I were to give you an anecdote, that I literally stood up and I told my professor that you need to tell me how do I think about this and how do I reason out, because I'm tending to agree with what the author is saying and I'm not being able to criticize it. Because back at home, we weren't engaging so much in terms of like critical reading with the authors. It was like the professor teaches you this in the exam. You talk about Section 34 in Contracts Act, for example, and you produce that with case laws and stuff. Here, you will not get marks if you genuinely cannot tackle the question that they give. And the questions in the exams are actually statements. They're very provocative statements. They're not black letter law. So that is one place where I was struggling, but I had my peers and my professors to help me out, and they taught me how to unlearn certain things so that I could learn it the better way.
Right.
So potentiality, but I can talk to you about certain aspects of it. So we were dealing with the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and we had about 10 to 12 people who were on the project with me. And it was not just LLM students. We had students from the TRIPOS, which would be the undergraduate course of the year. We had some PhD students, and we had certain, third-year PhD students overlooking the whole project. Now, the reason why I always wanted to get into the pro bono project was, it was aligned with my goals of doing international law. So when you come here, you must realize that 9 months is a really small time, right? You want to be able to put in everything you can within 9 months. Like, you want to, say, for example, you want to debate, you want to move, you want to study and also get good grades. You want to do other extracurricular activities, but you need to be able to balance it out because everything demands time, correct? So, there are three things that really the pro bono project taught me. Was one, to balance out my commitments, and it was fairly relaxed. It was not very overwhelming once you get a hang of it, and then the team really helps you. So the second bit would be that in terms of, I learned all the more to agree and disagree with my teammates. Like, we at certain points we didn't have consensus over certain aspects, correct? But and the third thing would be, I was exposed to the Latin American jurisprudence in terms of international law. Because this was a case particularly dealing with abortion and access to abortion, wherein the state had gone ahead and violated a woman's rights in terms of that. And that's the extent to which I can speak about it. But then we were all divided, and we had to see different jurisprudence. Like, we had to see the ECHR, like the European Court of Human Rights cases. We had to see US American cases, right? We had to see different countries, how they've looked at abortion and how they've looked at like pregnancy and stuff. So it really helped me build my research skills, because at the end of it all, we all had to prepare a report as to, what had we found and how can we assist the court. Because the report that we've made, that is being used by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights right now. And thankfully my name will come on, so I'm happy about that. But it just shows you that, there are certain nuanced ways of looking at things, and there are very basic areas of law that you're looking at, right? It doesn't seem very complicated in the start, but when you go down and you see that there are different countries looking at certain things so differently, and in your bones, it's aching that, this is wrong, but you still have to be able to come up with a balanced approach, because at the end of the day, you still have to be able to cater to the needs of the institution, and to the person who you're serving, right?
Right. It's actually very interesting when I'm listening to all the work you did at Cambridge. I want to, as an undergrad student, of course, any Oxbridge just seems like a dream at the moment. And I wanted to actually discuss the entry barriers which any undergrad student or any student who's interested not only in law, maybe public policy or sociology. I've seen so many students from Delhi University or India wanting to go to Oxbridge. And I want to understand your perspective on entry barriers, because it's not only entry barriers in terms of like just resources, but even funding, knowledge, just in general. What are your perspectives of it?
Most certainly. So, uh, for the ease of the audience and for us today, I'm going to divide this in terms of because there are different entry barriers, I feel, for like law students vis-a-vis for students coming in from different arts background, right? So firstly, the application process is really, really simple. It's a bit different for Oxford. I also happen to apply for Oxford. In Oxford, you also need to give like a written sample. And the written sample at Oxford is of paramount importance because they are a way more rigorous program as they try to project themselves, right? I can speak about Cambridge right now because I am at Cambridge and I applied to Cambridge. In terms of the entry barriers, or like what are the things that you need to really take care of, I feel, if you are thinking about applying for it, right? Oxbridge is quite hell-bent on grades. And it doesn't matter then which university you've come from. Because today in my cohort, I can see there are people from very, very different universities from India. We're the largest unit, by the way, in the LLM. We're about 40 to 45 students from India this year. And it's by and large every year like that. Like Indian students really dominated, not just because we have brains, but because we can bring a lot of the things on the table. So I don't think any Indian student, it is a distant dream to come to Oxford or Cambridge. It is not a dream. It should be more like a goal which is achievable. And it just like, if you've thought about it, you need to act on it, and I think you can make it, right? So firstly, do not think that it's not achievable. Secondly, you have to make sure that you have the grades more than anything, because that's kind of what they look at first, I feel. So if you can, and it's not like, don't deter yourself if you've not got the grades, right? You can obviously go ahead and make sure you fulfill that lack through something else. But there is no, today I cannot tell you what will definitely get you in here, right? I don't think anybody can tell you that. Even Cambridge cannot tell you that. They can tell you these are certain bits that you should work on, and if that's your day, you make it. A bit of checklist would be yes, grades. Second, make sure you've got experience in terms of what you're talking about, right? So for me, I wanted to study international law, correct? I made sure since the first year I was doing moods, and I really love to speak. If that's not a testament of what I am doing right now. The point is, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to be able to expose myself to different kinds of advocacy. So mooting was one bit. I debated at law school. I did a couple of debates. I did a lot of alternative dispute resolution competitions as well, because, you know, negotiation, mediation, that's the thing that's going to be ruling the world now, correct? So once you've gone ahead and exposed yourself in different areas, then you can make a story. See, when you're writing the application, it's all about telling them a convincing story about yourself, right? Once you have bits and pieces, you just need to thread it and make it look like a beautiful piece of cloth. So those were in terms of like, you know, co-curricular activities that you've done that relate to the law, right? Also make sure if you can have some research skills on your CV. It could be in any form. If you've written a paper, but it is important for you to write a good paper in a good journal. Okay, it doesn't matter if you've written 10 articles, but if you've written one article, say in a really good tier one law journal, that is much better. So give more time to quality rather than quantity, and that is really important. Um, you could also be the editor at law reviews. That is another way to showcase that you have the research grit in you. The third thing would be if you can work for NGOs, okay, if you can do some social work, and that is where all areas of undergraduate degrees can come into play, right? You can people who are from social and public policy background, say for example, if you're a lawyer, if you can go ahead, like if I were to put my example, I went and I worked for refugees, but I did have an element of international humanitarian law in it. I had an element of international refugee law, for example. But at the same time, my experiences from my refugee project have been super visceral, and that has been like the turning point for me to come and study at Cambridge. And that's one of the reasons why I also wanted to do the pro bono project. Do I sense a question?
Yeah, my question was that I agree with whatever you're saying, and that sounds like I think something which all students are working towards with the right mentor.
Absolutely.
But I also feel that the right mentorship in these areas is very important, and I think a lot of us have been very privileged to have the right mentorship. Even
Mm-hmm.
applying for their undergrad degree in CLAT requires a great amount of mentorship just to get through the process. So, how does access to mentorship happen? Because at the undergrad level, I know IDIA works very,
Mm-hmm.
very efficiently towards legal access, and they've been doing great work. So,
Mm-hmm.
for the higher education studies, especially higher education studies abroad, because at this point, there's also a lot of confusion in India because there's this news about the Indian government trying to cancel the 2 year LLM, Muslim LLM. So there's constant confusion. There's confusion about funding. There's confusion about, okay, what about opportunities, part time? What about the work experience which will get you there? Should you go after 3 years of working? Should you go after immediately? Something which is really talked about are letters of recommendation because it's
Mm-hmm.
like considered to be a massive entry barrier that not a lot of students are being able to get letters of recommendation. Sometimes, if you're not from very high tier colleges, you might not get letters of recommendations from very esteemed professors, which someone might get from a tier 1 college. And
Right.
I don't. Yeah. So my question to you is, how does one tackle access to mentorship in these cases?
Okay. You've spoken like a true lawyer because you've bombarded me with so many questions, but I will make sure I do justice to each one of them. So let's go step by step, right? The first thing in terms of access to mentorship for LLM education, say, for example, I do agree with you to an aspect that when you don't come, say, for example, from a tier 1 national law school, where you are in campus, where you have people and resources at your disposal, okay, it can be very different from coming from different law schools in our country. And it is not hidden. There are differences and there is information asymmetry at this point as we speak. But can you go ahead and tackle it? I believe you can. It will require a bit of more work from each and every person, but it is possible. I'm going to tell you two ways in which I try to do it, okay, which can be helpful for people. And I speak with experience. A is go to LinkedIn. It really helps. You have to take that extra effort. So I come from government law college where, the system in which our college functions, it's not hidden to the world. But the fact of the matter is that there have been certain amount of freedom that we've got in our college, which has helped me do certain things I wouldn't be able to do, say, for example, if I were in a national law school. Like, if I'm not mistaken, certain national law school have a cap on the amount of moots that you can do, correct? Which is fair, as I can see. But back in our college, we didn't have any cap on that. So I was able to go ahead and say, of course, quality over quantity. But if there was a particular area that I wanted to try, I had that freedom to go ahead and moot in that place without having any restrictions on me. I had the freedom to go ahead and intern and make mentors in my internship workplace because we were just literally 2 minutes away from the Bombay High Court or all the law firms, correct? So
Yeah.
we did have information asymmetry in certain aspects, but that was filled in by certain other privileges that students from government law college did get, right? So, if you want to seek mentorship apart from that, then you need to connect with people. And trust me, nobody's going to help you unless and until you open your mouth and ask for help because nobody's a mind reader, correct? So, LinkedIn, I feel, is one of the best tools these days to seek mentorship virtually and physically. So, what you can do is go out, see what areas you like. If you want to go to, say, for example, Cambridge University, you type out Cambridge University, you see so many LLM students out there, right? You drop them a message, hey, I am so and so from this person. I would love to speak to you about this. And trust me, people are open to communicate, they want to help. So that is one of the ways where you can seek mentorship. And I wouldn't be where I am because of the professors at Government Law College, my peers, my juniors in that institution. Secondly, the people all across the country from different law schools and law firms and judicial institutions, so to speak, and people all across the world. So I made it a point that before coming to these universities, I literally spoke to like at least 6 to 7 people who have graduated from here. So that helped me to understand the funding situation, that helped me to understand the course modules that I wanted to take, that helped me to understand what extracurricular activities I would be doing for the next 9 months. And that is what I mean to say when you have to do your homework, right? Funding situation. The second bit, the second limb of your question would be in terms of access to legal education. It is expensive. It is supremely expensive. I'm not going to deny it, especially when you come from a middle class family, you know, when your parents have the kind of money that I splurged on in my undergrad was peanuts, I will be honest. Okay. It was a government college, but the kind of returns that I've got from it, I cannot complain. It has been remarkable in terms of the returns that I got from that education. Now, there are different funding mechanisms for American institutions and for UK institutions. I fortunately did make it to certain American institutions and I did get funding. For example, from NYU, the New York University, I got the Dean Scholarship. But that was still not enough for me to go ahead and pursue a degree in America as opposed to come here and pursue. So when you pick a college, say for example, and if you get one of the happy problems, which is you have a lot of universities to choose from, right? It comes down to certain aspects on what do you really want. So for me, there were like three things. The first thing was, where am I going to get a better return for the education that I'm getting, right? Which is really going to help me um, when I decide to do, say, for example, I get into practice or if I want to get into a law firm, what skills from which university is going to be very important. And that is why you start looking at professors. And I realized Cambridge, because I wanted to do international law, the Lauterbach Center for International Law is one of the best. Um, it is like, this is where like legal jurists have made law. And when you walk the corridors of this, you can feel the power of that. The second bit would be the lifestyle that you're going to have. So New York, say for example, as opposed to a Cambridge town. I come from Bombay. I have been a part of a very fast-paced life, and New York would just have been faster than that, right? The third was funding, and it is really difficult, you know. But I also fortunately got a scholarship from the Cambridge Society of Bombay, scholarship fund. They were kind enough to go ahead and give me a scholarship for Cambridge. And after I came in here as well, I have had, and which is something that I will elaborate on in a few minutes, in terms of the opportunities that I have got from my college. So in Oxford and Cambridge, to put it simply, you have college systems. Okay, it's very decentralized form of administration that happens. You go to study at the Faculty of Law, but you stay and you eat and you study in terms of the library and stuff and the resources at colleges. So my college is Queen's College, and she's one of the patrons right there in the background. I didn't purposely do that, but yeah. The point is, the college then takes care of you. So you have a plethora of options in terms of funding that is possible. Like we have the hardship funding for somebody who has had certain funds, but due to certain extenuating circumstances, you're unable to use that funds. You have a lot of scholarships as well. The college gives you, the Faculty of Law could also give you, or the University of Cambridge could give you. You have the Cambridge Trust Scholarship, okay, which is something that you get when you're at the application stage to Cambridge. And you say you want funding, they will look at your application and stuff, and before you come into Cambridge, you can get funding. So there are different levels of funding that are there. I would say before you come into Cambridge, after you come into Cambridge also there's a possibility of some amount of funding. But it is an expensive affair. So this begs an important question. Do you certainly should have work experience before coming so that, say for example, you can save up some penny and you can utilize it? Or do you do it without work experience? I came in straight from undergrad because I knew I wanted to, say, pursue a degree in international law and I wanted prospects. And for that, I realized that the kind of work that I would have got in India right out of my law school weren't aligned to international law. And I needed a second degree to broaden my theoretical aspects because that is what I felt I was lacking, right? But I have a lot of peers who've done 5 years of work ex and they've come here. And the thing that they bring on the table becomes different from what I bring on the table. But trust me, everybody brings something on the table. And that's what matters.
Right. We would be ending it now. So do you have any parting remarks for our audience today?
Yes. I would actually like to talk about one very important thing, if I have your permission.
Thank
And absolutely. So I'll keep this brief. But so fortunately, I happened to get a grant from my college, and I ended up doing. I got the McDonald Graduate Fund. For example, I ended up doing a Euro trip, or because my college funded the entire trip for me, and I went to 6 countries, 12 cities. I took 25 trains, by the way, and I attended the Paris Arbitration Week in Paris. So I met like a lot of arbitrators and really good scholars in international arbitration. I went to the International Court of Justice for the first time in my life. I went to the International Criminal Court and I saw the trial. I had done the Henry Dunant moot, say for example, and I had only read about ICC in paper. So for me to be able to see a trial happening right in front of my eyes was a life-changing experience. I went to the United Nations. So I have fortunately, having been to so many model United Nations, to be able to go to the Human Rights Council and sit there and see like this is where things are happening. The whole experience, and given that my college and my university was helpful towards that, because again, it's very difficult for a student to come from India and go and do their Euro trip, right? But the point is that this trip, and I did all this by myself. I traveled solo all across these countries. And I can tell you that it is so liberating. So my point is, and this is for the audience, right? Even after you come here, make sure you're not just confined to what this place has to offer. If you go ahead and research that there are these opportunities, like somebody who comes here, they may not know that your college can fund these things, right? You have to write a proposal and tell them, I want this amount and I want to be able to take this amount and utilize it for the betterment, not just for the society I live in, but for myself. And I kid you not, I have had the opportunity to meet the Indian ambassadors in each of these countries. So when I walked into the Indian embassy, say for example, it literally felt like I was back at home because it's our jurisdiction, right? And the kind of conversations I had with diplomats, I had with arbitrators, with ICJ judges, right? Those really shaped the way I look at my life right now and what I want to do. Like the Kavita Mohanty that I was 9 months ago before I entered this institution, and right now as I speak to you, Vedika, I've had different opinions and they've just been better. So I don't think you should constrain yourself in terms of what you want to do in life, because you don't know what are the opportunities you're going to get. So just feel free to go ahead and walk the path that you might have not thought about, because it is a great feeling, right?
At this point, I understand why you're speaking so passionately about an experience at Cambridge, because it is just consistently and constantly always kept on offering opportunities and opportunities
Exactly.
and opportunities. And in fact, after you graduate, it will still be a community which you can always reach out to, the society
Correct.
you can always be a part of, and opportunities. And in a way, there's just a butterfly effect of multiplying opportunities.
I think you precisely said it
Now I
well.
got like the gist of it, because I think it's the last remark which I finally understood that okay, yeah, because sitting from my place, I see it as a beautiful institution there in an entire continent away, and it's amazing, and it has great faculty and a very rigorous way of entry and massive entry barriers. But when you look at it from your perspective, being there, it just seems like there's plethora of opportunities available, which I personally have never heard of. And I felt like I have done a lot of research on what I want to do for my LLM, but like sitting here, I'm like, okay, like that's an option. Like, oh my god, university is actually